Okay, this is going to be section 5 for chapter 5, AGBS 2. Um, again, our calculations really aren't changing a lot. We just have some different variables that we're going to be using, or different items that we're going to be focusing on. So again, the math stays the same. We're just going to substitute those variables a little bit differently. So we're still looking at the percent change in quantity, trying to find out what's going to happen with that. But what we're going to compare it to is the change in price of a different product. So we know that some products are complements of one another. If you purchase, you're going to purchase hot dogs. Most likely you're going to purchase hot dog buns. So those two complement one another. They are usually purchased together. If you purchase hot dogs and you purchase how about deli rolls, well, they can still be used together, but they wouldn't necessarily have as much of a connection. If you purchased hot dogs and a bar of soap, I don't see, other than maybe you get messy eating hot dogs, but for the most part those don't have anything in common, so their relationship would be pretty much near nothing. So we'll take a look at how that's calculated. In this case, we're going to look at hamburgers and tacos. And as we look at those, we're going to have to determine, well, what's going on with the change in a specific price, and what impact's that going to have on our consumption, or the quantity demanded for the other product. So let's just take a look at these two options for cross price elasticity, and we can say that if it's a positive relationship, those items are substitutes for one another. So you have Oscar Mayer hot dogs and you have Swift hot dogs. Both of them are hot dogs. They can substitute one for the other. You're going to go ahead and see that you have a positive number. If it's a negative number, they complement one another, like the hot dogs and the hot dog buns. If it calculates out to be 0, it means that they're independent of one another, meaning that the sale of one, or the price change in one, is going to have no effect on the change in the quantity demanded of the other. So I put together, this is going to be worksheet number 3, and looks similar, but I've kind of divided things up into product A and product B, mainly because, that's what we're going to have to look at, the change. This is going to be the quantity side. What's going to happen to the quantity of product A when the price of product B changes? So we can see that price set up here, and we can see the quantity demanded set up here. So as the price is increasing for product B, we can see that the quantity demanded for product A is also increasing. Now, not always incrementally exactly the same, but both of these are increasing because we're talking about one product getting more expensive. The other product, you're seeing that people will consider purchasing more of the other product. I'm not going to go through the numbers. You guys should be able to work through these as a third time you've seen this. Here's your change in quantity. Here's your average quantity, and then your percent change in quantity. Here we have our change in price of product B, our average price for product B, and then our percent change in price for product B. So all you're going to be doing is taking your percent change in quantity divided by your percent change in price. Rid of that guy. And that's going to come up with your income elasticity as we move through this. What you're going to do at the end, though, is based on that elasticity, and remember that we said if it's positive number, they're substitutes, negative number, they're complements, 0 is independent. You're going to go ahead and you're going to circle either the substitute, the complement, or the independent for each of those as you move through it. Let's take a look at some other examples. So we have some products that I think right off you can identify that they would be substitutes for one another. And in some cases, we see that the values in blue, as an example, that's the own price elasticity for those individual products. And when we say that we are comparing them to themselves, that's why their own price elasticity is here. So Prego to Prego, there's its own price elasticity. Ragu to Ragu, we have that price elasticity, and then Hunt's to Hunt's. If we look at comparing these different products to each other, excuse me, next one down, we can see that there's an increase in the price of Ragu spaghetti sauce, and it has a larger impact on the Hunt spaghetti sauce and vice versa. So as we change, if we look at Hunt's compared to Ragu, we see that there is a positive number there that is an increase of 0.53 when Hunt's is compared to Hunt's. There's its own price elasticity. When Ragu is compared to Hunt's, we have a different elasticity because they're two different products. Even though we look at them from one direction going in one direction, we're going to see a own price elasticity. So example, here's Hunt's and Ragu. Okay. If we look at Hunt's and Ragu here, they're different. Why? Because we're comparing two different types of products. Example would be, let's say we have apples and bananas, and we say that people that like apples would prefer apples over bananas. They would have a specific cross-price elasticity, cross-price elasticity for that. But if they said they preferred bananas over apples, well, how much more did they prefer? And that's what this is. It's a rating of how much more do they prefer one product over the other. A lot of times we can use these as a perception to determine maybe overall quality of a given good. So you can go through, again, this PowerPoint is up, so you can always go through and take a look at those cross-price elasticities. One example that we're going to take a look at is cross-price elasticity for hamburger in respect to the price of hamburger buns. And we can see that that is a negative number, and it's 0.60. So the price of hamburger buns goes up by 5%. So if it goes up by 5%, what's the impact on hamburger consumption? If hamburger buns increase in price, are people going to have, are they going to consume more or less hamburgers? And there may be at the point that they're not going to consume hamburgers as a sandwich, but we also know that hamburger has other uses. So we'll talk about that much later. But for the most part, as we look at this and we say, well, what is the demand relationship between them? We know that if this rises by 5%, the impact on the hamburger consumption is going to be a decrease of 3%. Why? Because we have this relationship here. So we have a 0.60 is going to be that relationship. That's equal to the percent change in quantity of hamburgers as it relates to the percent change in price of the hamburger buns. Okay. So again, same math we did before. We have this here. We determined what that percentage change is. There's your percent change. And then we move that to the outside, made this a multiplication. So we said 5 times negative 0.6, and that brings us to negative 3%. So that would be a negative 3% in terms of that change. So the two products are complements of one another because they're negative. So you can see that negative, that's going to indicate that they are complements of one another. If a retailer sells 1,000 six-packs of Pepsi each day at a price of $3 per six-pack, so we have 1,000 is our quantity, and our price is $3. Assume that cross price elasticity between Pepsi and Coke, and I have to make a fix on those, between Pepsi and Coke is cross price elasticity is equal to 0.70, which is a positive. And we're going to say that that we're going to go ahead and the price of Coke is going to increase by 5%. So the percent change in price of Coke is 5%. So let's plug the information that we have in there. We'll plug it into our equation that we looked at before. So we have that 0.70 is going to be our cross price elasticity, and we know that that's the percent change in quantity of Pepsi divided by the percent change in price of Coke. Well, we know the percent change in price of Coke, which we determined here to be 5%. We plug that in there. Again, our cross price elasticity, we're looking for that percent change in quantity of Pepsi. Here's our 5% that we figured for Coke. We plug those in, and we're going to say that our new quantity sold is going to be the 1,000 times the 1.035. Now, why is it 1? 1 means that's the original price, or the original quantity, and then it's going to increase by 3.5%. So when we multiply it by 1.35, it's going to give us our new value, our new quantity. So what's going to happen with sales? Well, before we sold this many, now we're going to sell this many. We're just going to multiply that number by the price, and that's going to give us our new revenue line. So that new revenue line is going to say that we are going to sell an additional 35 six-packs, or we are going to make that $105 per day is going to be that increase. Product demand relationship, we know that it's a positive. So what does that tell us? It tells us that they're substitutes. Again, that number is a positive number. They are substitutes for one another. We're going to finish this out. We've got 3 minutes to finish this out. We talked about price flexibility. Again, price flexibility is just going to be the reciprocal of that own price elasticity. So if our own price elasticity in this example is a negative 0.25, we would then say that our price flexibility is going to be negative 4.0. How do we figure it? Percent change in price is the 4.0 times the percent change in quantity. In this case, we see a plus of 2% with this example up here. That means that we have a negative 8%. So the supply would increase by 2%, price would fall by 8%. So that's a 4 to 1 ratio. So how do we determine that? So again, I said that 0.25 is 1/4. Okay, 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. Reciprocal of that is 4/1, and that is equal to 4.0. Okay, so we're seeing that that's just a simple division problem there. What does that tell us? You can tell if own price elasticity for a product is elastic, unitary, or inelastic. Again, this is agriculture. We're going to take a look at that and say, well, if we cut the price, we increase revenue if it's elastic. If we increase the price, we're going to decrease revenue if it's elastic. Again, not a change in unitary. And if it's inelastic, if we cut the price, we're going to decrease revenue. If we increase the price, we're going to increase revenue. And that's very common when it comes to agricultural goods. So that's the end of the chapter. You can go back and review each of the individual sections. As you have questions, make sure you get a hold of me and ask those questions.